The Battle of Lexington took place on April 19th, 1775, in the town of Lexington, Massachusetts. The conflict between the colonists and the British royal government had been brewing for the past few months, ever since the powder alarm and the capture of Fort William and Mary back in December. The gun battle that took place on Lexington grounds between the local militia and the British Royal Marines lasted for several minutes that left 8 militiamen dead and 10 wounded, while the British suffered 1 casualty. Hours before the confrontation, over 70 militiamen gathered at a local hangout, the Buckman Tavern. Local militia members like to gather there for recreation and for practicing drills at the nearby Lexington Green. The men were alerted in the wee hours by Paul Revere, who, during his infamous midnight ride, alerted the people in the area about the British military. They were coming to the towns of Lexington and Concord to destroy the militia's stockpile of weapons and cannon pieces to thwart any rebellion against the crown. British military in the Boston area was under the leadership of Lieutenant Colonel Francis Smith. He was given the order to destroy the militia weapons by General Thomas Gage. Major John Pitcairn of the Royal Marines was to lead his unit into Lexington that morning, due to the respect the locals had for him, to play peacemaker, while Colonel Hugh Hersey provided support in the rear for Smith and Pitcairn. The leader of the Massachusetts militia was captained by John Parker, a veteran of the French and Indian War. At the time, he was suffering from a grave case of tuberculosis, but despite his dire condition, he retained command over the militia. Parker and his men hung around the tavern waiting to hear for information about the British Army and if they were indeed marching towards Lexington. The news was confirmed around 4:15 in the morning. Parker and his band of militia men, which was now around 80, decided to leave the tavern and march toward the Lexington grounds. The British soldiers that were marching towards the town was a large detachment of 400 Royal Marines, which were being led by Pitcairn. Despite being heavily outnumbered, Parker and his men formed into a parade ground formation and wanted to show the British Marines that they weren't backing down, but didn't want to engage them. Captain Parker later said about his plan to confront the Royal Marines at the Lexington grounds, "I ordered our militia to meet on the Common in said Lexington to consult what to do and to conclude not to be discovered nor meddle or make with said regular troops, unless they should insult or molest us. And, upon their sudden approach, I immediately ordered our militia to disperse and not to fire. Immediately, said troops made their appearance and rushed fiercely, fired upon us, and killed 8 of our party without receiving any provocation, therefore, from us. Instead of bypassing a small group of militiamen and head for Concord, Pitcairn's Marines decided to line up in a defensive formation in an attempt to confront the group, surround, and force them to drop their weapons and disperse. Nobody knew which British military officer told the militia to disperse, but from several different accounts it was either Major Pitcairn or his Lieutenant William Sutherland. According to depositions from several militiamen, such as Elijah Sanderson, he said, "I heard one of the regulars, whom I took to be an officer, say, 'Damn them, we'll have them,' and immediately the regulars shouted aloud, run, and fired on the Lexington Company, which did not fire a gun before the regulars discharged on them." Thomas Price Willard said, "Directly after this, an officer rode before the regulars to the other side of the body and hallooed after the militia of said Lexington and said, 'Lay down your arms, damn you! Why don't you lay down your arms?'" Another witness, John Robinson, said, "I being in the front rank, there suddenly appeared a number of King's troops at a distance about 60 or 70 yards from us, huzzaing and on quick pace towards us, with 3 officers in their front on horseback and on full gallop towards us, the foremost of which cried, 'Throw down your arms, ye villains, ye rebels,' upon which said company, dispersing, the foremost of the 3 officers ordered their men, saying, 'Fire! By God, fire!' At which moment we received a very heavy and close fire from them. Before the shots were fired, Captain Parker, realizing the situation his militia was in was hopeless, decided to tell his men to disengage and go back to their homes. But due to his tuberculosis reducing his voice to a raspy whisper, and the chaos created by the several hundred Marines lining up in military formation on the grounds, made his commands unclear, and that's when a shot rang out. British Royal Marine Lieutenant John Barker said about the chaotic start of the Battle of Lexington, "Around 5 o'clock we arrived and saw a number of people, I believe between 200 and 300, formed in the common in the middle of the town. We still continued advancing, keeping prepared against an attack, though without intending to attack them. But on our coming near them, they fired upon us 2 shots, upon which our men, without any orders, rushed upon them, fired, and put them to flight. Some of them were killed. We could not tell how many because they were behind walls and into the woods. We had a man of the 10th Light Infantry wounded. Nobody else was hurt. We then formed on the common, but with some difficulty. The men were so wild they could not hear no orders. We waited a considerable time there and at length proceeded our way towards Concord. A member of the Lexington militia, Corporal John Monroe, said, after the first fire of the regulars, I thought, and so stated to Ebenezer Monroe, who stood next to me on the left, that they had fired nothing but powder. But on the second firing, Monroe stated they had fired something more than powder, for he had received a wound in his arm, and now, he said, to use his own words, I'll give them the guts of my gun. We then both took aim at the main body of the British troops. The smoke prevented our seeing anything but the heads of some of their horses, and discharged our pieces. After several volleys of gunfire from both sides, the Royal Marines fixed bayonets and charged the militiamen who were still standing their ground on the common. When the smoke cleared and the militiamen were chased from the area, 8 of them were dead and 10 were wounded by the British. Only 1 redcoat suffered a casualty. Many of the Royal Marines continued to chase the retreating militiamen. Major Pitcairn tried to rally his Marines and continue on to Concord, but many of them wanted to hunt them all down. Second detachment of British soldiers, led by Colonel Francis Smith, finally arrived in Lexington and restored order within the ranks of the Royal Marines. Colonel Smith ordered them to fire a victory volley before having his drummer boy lead them onto the town of Concord to complete their mission and destroy the colonists' supplies of powder and cannon pieces. But when the soldiers arrived in the town of Concord, they would find themselves greeted by a very large welcoming committee.